Mark and Helen Buchanan were the kind of couple everyone admired: successful, loving parents raising two bright kids, Emily and Jake, in a peaceful Vermont town. But on a quiet October morning, their perfect life shattered without a sound. The entire Buchanan family vanished without a trace, leaving behind a half-eaten breakfast, a barking dog, and a house full of chilling clues that defied all logic. What happened inside that home has haunted investigators for years, and what they discovered next was something no one could explain. The Buchanan family seemed like the kind you only read about in magazines. They lived on a quiet street at the edge of Fairhaven, Vermont, in a large colonial-style home surrounded by tall maple trees. The lawn was always perfectly trimmed, the white shutters freshly painted, and there was a warm glow from the windows that made the house feel like a postcard. Mark Buchanan was a well-known architect with a local firm, respected for his creativity and charitable donations. His wife, Helen, was a beloved third-grade teacher at the town's elementary school. Their two children, Emily and Jake, were polite, well-dressed, and active in school activities. Emily was a top student with a passion for ocean life. Jake loved video games, baseball, and his dog, Scout. Every Sunday morning, the family attended church together. They were always dressed neatly, arriving a few minutes early and leaving with smiles and friendly waves. To neighbors, the Buchanans were the definition of normal: friendly, responsible, stable. But in October of 2019, that picture-perfect image would be shattered in the most chilling and confusing way. It started like any other morning. The sun rose over the hill, birds chirped, and the neighborhood began to wake up. But the Buchanan home remained quiet. Scout, their usually quiet dog, began barking frantically in the backyard at sunrise and didn't stop. For hours, his barking echoed across the neighborhood until Mrs. Elkins, the elderly woman next door, decided to check in. She walked to the front door and noticed something strange. It was slightly open. That wasn't normal. She knocked softly, then called out. No answer. She opened the door slowly and stepped inside. The house was eerily silent. The air was still, heavy, and cold. Breakfast plates were on the kitchen table: half-eaten toast, cereal bowls with soggy flakes, a coffee cup still steaming faintly. Emily's school bag was by the front door, along with Jake's sneakers and lunchbox. Upstairs, all the beds had been slept in, blankets thrown off, as if the family had woken up in a rush. But there was no sign of them anywhere. Their phones were still in the house, along with their wallets and car keys. The family car sat untouched in the garage. There were no broken windows, no blood, no signs of a break-in or struggle. Scout was the only living presence in the house, whining and scratching at the back door. Police were called immediately, and within the hour, the Buchanan home became the center of a major investigation. Officers searched the house room by room, looking for anything that might hint at what had happened. Forensics teams took samples, dusted for fingerprints, and bagged items for analysis. But nothing made sense. People began to gather on the sidewalk, whispering among themselves, confused and concerned. How could 4 people vanish without a trace? News trucks arrived before sunset. A missing persons bulletin was issued, and a search party was formed that very night. Helicopters flew overhead, dogs combed the nearby woods, and the town of Fairhaven held its breath. But no one found anything. Not a footprint, not a clue. The Buchanan family had simply disappeared. Inside the Buchanan house, investigators combed through every room, searching for anything that could explain the family's sudden disappearance. The dining table still had fur plates on it, 2 of them with untouched pancakes. A small bottle of maple syrup stood open, sticky to the touch. Emily's school binder was on the kitchen counter, open to a page of math homework marked with neat pencil notes. It looked like they had been in the middle of an ordinary morning, and then they were just gone. Detectives checked every door and window. None were forced open. There were no signs of violence, no overturned furniture, no blood, no broken glass. Helen's purse was still hanging on the coat rack, her wallet inside. Mark's car keys were on the hallway table, right beside his phone. Even Jake's game controller was still plugged in, left at the pause screen of a racing game. All their belongings were untouched, but the further the investigation went, the stranger things became. In the basement, something stood out immediately. Against the cold concrete floor sat a strange arrangement of candles, black, burned almost down to the base, and placed in a perfect circle. In the center of the circle was a shattered mirror. Its pieces were scattered, but not randomly. The shards formed a strange, almost symmetrical pattern, like someone had arranged them with care. No one in the family had any known ties to the occult. They weren't religious beyond casual church attendance. Helen's bookshelf was filled with children's stories and novels. Mark's office had blueprints, not spellbooks, and then there was Emily's diary. Tucked beneath her mattress, the worn notebook revealed pages filled with everyday entries: school stress, crushes, her dream of studying sea turtles. But the last few entries changed in tone. They became short, more anxious. One entry read, "I heard the humming again last night. Jake said he didn't hear it, but I know he did. He's scared too." Other, just 2 days before they vanished, said, "Something is watching us. I thought it was a dream, but it's not." The final entry, dated the night before the disappearance, sent chills through the investigation team. It read, "He comes when we dream. But tonight, I'm not going to sleep." Police took the items in as evidence, hoping for fingerprints or DNA that might offer a lead. But there was nothing out of place. No unknown prints, no foreign hairs, or traces of anyone outside the family. No signs that anyone had entered or exited the house in any unusual way. Outside, neighbors were questioned. Most said they hadn't seen or heard anything strange. But one man who lived directly across the street remembered something odd. Around AM that morning, he'd gotten up for water and noticed the Buchanan porch light was on. He thought he saw a figure standing near their front steps, but when he blinked and looked again, it was gone. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. The candles, the mirror, the diary, the missing family, nothing added up. It was as if the Buchanans had walked out of their home in the middle of an ordinary morning and stepped into another reality, leaving only confusion behind. Detectives turned their attention to external clues, hoping security footage from nearby homes could shed light on what happened in the early hours of October 14th. Several houses on the street had doorbell cameras or exterior surveillance systems, and investigators collected hours of video to analyze. Most of it showed normal, quiet suburban activity: cars parked, porch lights flickering, a few raccoons crossing driveways in the middle of the night. But one recording from the Miller residence directly across from the Buchanan home captured something no one could explain. At exactly 3:13 a.m., a tall figure appeared in the footage, standing completely still at the edge of the Buchanan front lawn. It was too far from the camera for a clear image, but the figure seemed thin, with elongated arms, and a head slightly tilted to one side. The porch light cast a faint glow in the direction of the figure, but oddly, it created no shadow on the ground. It remained there, motionless, for nearly 40 minutes before vanishing entirely. There was no record of it walking away, no shift in the surrounding bushes or sidewalk. One frame, it was there then, it wasn't. Forensics tried enhancing the image, adjusting brightness and contrast to identify facial features or clothing. But the more they enhanced it, the less human it appeared. Its outline blurred unnaturally, as though the camera couldn't properly capture its shape. It didn't match any known criminal profiles or patterns. And the footage had no audio, only faint static that grew louder during the time the figure was visible. Around the same time the figure appeared, another clue was uncovered. A neighbor's doorbell camera, 4 houses down, had picked up an unusual audio spike. There was a burst of high-pitched sound barely noticeable to the human ear, but clearly captured in the data. Audio analysts studied it closely and discovered, when slowed down and filtered, what sounded like whispering. A voice, distorted and unclear, repeating a phrase, "The hollow waits." No one could explain what it meant. There was no previous record of that phrase connected to the Buchanans or any known criminal or cult activity. It was like a message from nowhere. Local media ran the story, but police kept most details of the footage hidden from the public to avoid panic. Unofficially, theories began circulating. Some thought it was a stalker or a disturbed individual playing a cruel trick. Others were convinced the footage had captured something paranormal. Online forums exploded with speculation ranging from secret government experiments to spiritual entities. The image of the figure standing at the edge of the lawn became a viral sensation, dubbed the Watcher of Fairhaven. But despite widespread interest and numerous calls and tips, no one could identify the figure. No one recognized it. No one claimed to have seen it elsewhere. The mystery only deepened, and within the police department, detectives began quietly admitting something they rarely voiced out loud. This was no ordinary disappearance. Something about the Buchanan case felt beyond the reach of reason. 2 months after the Buchanan family vanished, the case had stalled. Leads had dried up, and public attention had begun to drift. Then a breakthrough came unexpectedly, from a handwritten letter mailed anonymously to the Fairhaven Police Department. The envelope contained no return address and no fingerprints. Inside was a single page with carefully printed words: "The answers you want are buried in the roots. Look where it all began." The farm still remembers. Detectives weren't sure what to make of it at first, but after some digging through property records, they found a possible connection. Mark Buchanan had inherited a piece of land about 30 miles from Fairhaven, a neglected farm that had belonged to his grandfather, but hadn't been mentioned publicly or used in decades. It had no utilities, no running water, and was surrounded by dense woods. None of the neighbors in Fairhaven knew the Buchanans had a family property elsewhere. The next morning, officers and search teams traveled to the remote location. The farm sat at the end of a gravel road, choked with weeds and framed by collapsing fences. The house was in ruins, barely standing, but the barn still seemed intact. As they stepped onto the property, many officers noted an odd silence. No birds, no wind, just the sound of their boots on dried leaves. Inside the barn, searchers found recent signs of activity: fresh footprints in the dirt, discarded food wrappers, and a plastic water bottle that still had condensation inside. There were also more of the black candles, like those found in the Buchanan basement, their wax melted into the floorboards. In the center of the barn was something far more disturbing: a white painted symbol, nearly 6 feet wide, matching the broken mirror pattern from the Buchanan home. It had been drawn directly on the wooden floor in a chalky substance, surrounded by scorched marks that suggested small fires had burned nearby. In the upper loft of the barn, officers discovered a child-sized jacket buried in hay. A tag inside read Emily. It was the same blue windbreaker she'd worn in her last school photo. The barn was immediately sealed off, and the farm became the new center of the investigation. Over the next several days, cadaver dogs searched the area, and forensic teams swept every inch of the property. Then came the cellar. Hidden behind a collapsed tool shed was a locked, rusted hatch leading underground. After prying it open, officers descended a short staircase and found a small earthen room. The air was damp and cold. In the center was a shallow trench freshly dug, yet empty. But around it stood 5 mannequins, eerily lifelike, dressed in clothing that perfectly matched the last known outfits of Mark, Helen, Emily, Jake, and even their dog, Scout. Each mannequin had its eyes blacked out with paint, and a single word pinned to its chest. Together, the words formed a message: "You cannot bury what isn't dead." No physical remains were found, no evidence of who had been there, just a terrible feeling of being watched. Investigators left the farm with more questions than answers, and the mystery grew even darker. 6 months after the Buchanan family vanished, the case had turned cold. The leads had stopped coming. The news coverage slowed. The public began to move on. But then, without warning, something happened that reignited everything anew. An terrifying clue surfaced, pulling the case into deeper, more disturbing territory. Late one evening, video appeared on Emily Buchanan's school email account. The account had been inactive since her disappearance and should have been locked down by school administrators. Yet somehow, a 30-second video was uploaded and sent to every contact in her inbox. The video was dark and shaky. At first, there was only blackness, and then the faint flicker of a candle came into view, casting a dim glow across what appeared to be the Buchanan living room. Furniture could be made out in shadows: the familiar couch, a coffee table, a lamp. Everything was as it had been months earlier, but with one difference. The room was silent, lifeless, and unnaturally still. The camera moved slowly, as though held by trembling hands. In the corner of the room near the fireplace, a tall shadow began to form. At first, it looked like a trick of the light, but then it moved smoothly, deliberately. The figure from the old neighborhood footage was there again, partially obscured. In the darkness, its head turned slightly toward the camera. Then the video cut to static. It lasted only 30 seconds, but it sent waves of panic through everyone who saw it. Parents, students, and teachers flooded the school with calls. Law enforcement immediately traced the IP address used to upload the video. What they found was impossible. The signal originated from a remote, decommissioned radio tower in the nearby hills, property once used for emergency broadcasts, but abandoned for years. The tower had no power, no internet access, and no recent records of entry. Still, a team was dispatched. When they arrived, they found the facility in ruins. The door was forced open, as if from the inside. Electronic equipment was either missing or melted, wires twisted like vines. In one of the back rooms, investigators discovered dozens of torn pages pinned to the walls. Some were pages from textbooks, others from children's stories. But on each was the same phrase, scrawled in shaky handwriting: "The hollow waits." The exact same phrase heard in the distorted whisper months earlier. Forensics teams could find no trace of the Buchanan family, no new DNA, no signs of struggle. But there was something even more disturbing. In the corner of the room, under a pile of dusty cables, lay a children's backpack. Inside were a sketchbook, a cracked iPhone, and a plush turtle. All belonged to Emily. The evidence was overwhelming and yet inconclusive. No one could understand how the video was sent or who had created it. Some believed it was a cruel hoax. Others believed the Buchanans were still alive, but no longer in our world. The house remains locked, the windows boarded, and no one has lived there since. Late at night, some claim to see lights flicker inside, or hear a child laughing, but no one dares to get too close, because whatever took the Buchanan family was never caught, never seen again, and never explained. It simply vanished with them.